His last wish before his execution was simple: to see the dog who one day saved his soul. In the white corridor, Thessalon's, it was so heavy that each breath, it seemed like an early goodbye. Guards lined up, cold light, footsteps echoing like a cruel clock marking the end. Behind the metal door, a German shepherd named Max tugged at the leash, sensing something was wrong. Enter light and darkness. Between guilt and forgiveness, two destinies were about to meet again. And nobody there imagined that that encounter between man and heroite would change everything. Lucas had worked as a prison guard for 10 years, but he never got used to death row. Behind the uniform, he was just a tired father, coming home late and hugging his familiars if it were the last time. His only escape was Max, the dog who trained in his spare time, a former puppy rescuer who understood more than heart greater than any human. On silent nights, when the weight of work turned storm inside, Lucas felt Max's gaze holding his up. He believed that animal possessed something sacred, a kind of faith, that which cannot be explained, only felt. And that was precisely it. Loyalty which he carried with him on that day, when everything seemed already written. The condemned man that night was named Raphael, a man in his 40s with eyes that always seemed moist with tears. Tears. Accused of a brutal crime, he awaited death like someone waiting for a delayed train, trapped between fear and resignation. In recent months, Lucas had realized that there was something different about him, assaillant strange, not out of guilt, but as someone carrying a secret that is too heavy. While others cursed, begged, or challenged, Raphael only asked for one thing: news of his mother, of that woman, Mother Fragile, whom he said he had left alone. And in a whisper, he spoke of a dog that one day saved his life, as if that animal were his only point of reference, light that darkness. Every time I heard that, Lucas pressed the button, but the system wasn't designed to listen to stories, only sentences. It was on a grey morning with a heavy sky that Raphael's official request arrived. His last wish was to see Max. The document seemed absurd, and many laughed in the break room, thinking it was just another attempt to get attention. But Lucas read those lines slowly, feeling a different weight, as if there were a thread of destiny tying up a man and dog. He remembered when Max was still a puppy, taken from a shelter in the middle of a storm, trembling, but with eyes full of hope. Perhaps that was why that story bothered him. It was as if two lives marked by guilt and rescue were about to cross paths. Between cold protocols and warm hearts, Lucas decided to take the risk and took the request to his superiors. "You know this isn't common," said the director, looking over his glasses, his voice firm and distant. He spoke of rules, public image, dangerous precedents, but Lucas could only think about love and loyalty. "It's just a quick meeting," he insisted, sensing the heart accelerate as if something invisible were pushing him in that direction. "Perhaps it will bring a little of peace before the end, for him and for all of us." After long seconds of silence, the director sighed deeply, yielding to that mixture of protocol and compassion. The request was approved, and the day of the execution took on a new significance. It would not only be the end, but also a reunion. When Max entered the corridor of the isolation ward, something changed in the air. The dog, he stopped walking, raised his head, and pulled a breath deeply, as if detecting a hidden scent. Lucas found the gesture strange, because the animal had never stopped like that before. The corridor was insolence illuminated only by cold lamps. Max fixed his gaze on Raphael's door. The heart accelerated. It was as if an ancient instinct had just awakened. Lucas tried to encourage him to continue, but Max planted his paws firmly on the ground, trembling slightly, as if something invisible were calling to him. The guard beside him laughed, saying that the dog he was reacting to the smell of guilt, but Lucas sensed something else, something deeper, almost spiritual. It was as if Soul Max recognized something that humans couldn't see. The atmosphere grew heavy, leaving a trail of darkness in that dim light. As he approached the cell, Max began to emit a low groan, not of fear, but of warning. Lucas observed the movement of Dog, noticing that the animal was trying to reach the door with its paw, as if it wanted to enter immediately. Raphael, sitting on the narrow bed, raised his head when he heard the sound. His eyes filled with tears, as if that hope he had returned after years. Something there was more than just simple longing. Raphael approached the bars slowly, his voice weak as a wet whisper. "I know that look," he said, pressing his forehead against the cold iron. Max responded by pushing his snout between the bars, the heart of the animal that had run away. Lucas felt his stomach churn, because he had never seen the dog to react like that to a prisoner. It seemed like a vivid memory, something trapped in soul of both. The entire corridor was in silence, awaiting the next gesture. One of the guards interrupted. "The early visit is over, only during official hours." The words cut the moment short, but Max didn't move. He barked softly, not aggressively, but with urgency, as if trying to warn of something no one understood. Lucas gripped the leash tightly, feeling the weight of that tension. It was as if the dog was between light and darkness, trying to choose which side to follow. Behind the bars, Raphael trembled. In the preparation room, while they waited for their turn, Max paced in circles, sniffing the concrete floor. His restless behavior was striking. It wasn't fear, it was pure alertness. Lucas observed the way it pricked up its ears, as if listening to sounds that humans couldn't perceive. Something there formed a strange pattern, almost a silent call. Loyalty, do dog it, seemed to push him to discover something. When a technician entered with a clipboard, Max immediately growled, something rare for such a calm animal. The man was startled and dropped some papers, revealing an old envelope. Max quickly sniffed the paper, the heart accelerated. Lucas noticed a metallic smell coming from the object, too strange to be there. The technician, nervous, quickly collected everything but the dog. He kept his gaze fixed. There was something in that envelope. Lucas found everything unusual. He tried to calm Max down, but he rested his head on his chest, as if asking for understanding. It was a gesture he only made when he needed to warn of imminent danger. Silence. The tension in the room increased, and the fluorescent light flickered, creating shadows that made everything more tense. Max pulled on the leash again, this time towards the opposite hallway. Lucas felt the weight of the animal's instinct. The head guard noticed the commotion and scoffed, "Your hero! He's afraid of his own shadow." But Lucas knew how to distinguish fear from intuition. Max was sniffing the air with surgical precision, as if searching for a lost thread of truth. He stopped in front of a door that no one had used for weeks. A chill ran down Lucas's spine when the animal barked short and steady. There was something inside, something no one expected. The guards reluctantly opened the door, just to prove there was nothing there. But when the light came on, it revealed an empty room, except for a folded baby blanket in the corner. Max moved over to the blanket and lay down beside it, something he only did in situations of rescue. Lucas touched the blanket and smelled the sweet, familiar scent of a baby. His breath caught in his throat. Why was that there? And why had Max reacted as if he'd found a piece of his own self? Soul. Meanwhile, Raphael waited in his cell, restless, pacing back and forth. He seemed to sense something in the air, as if this meeting were much more than a farewell. Silence. It disturbed him, and the memory of Puppy, the one who had once saved him, was returning like a faint light in darkness. He looked down the empty hallway, feeling the heartbeat faster. Something was about to happen, and he didn't know if it was good or bad. Back in the room, Max nudged the blanket with his snout, almost as if asking Lucas to pick it up. The man hesitated, but Dog, he insisted, barking softly, repeatedly. Lucas put the blanket inside his backpack, feeling a shiver run down his neck. It seemed that that small piece of fabric carried a deep secret, an echo of family, love and pain mixed together. Something that needed to be discovered quickly. As they were about to leave, Max growled at the clipboard technician again. The man tried to act natural, but his hands trembled, and a cold sweat trickled down his temple. Lucas noticed the discomfort, something too strange to ignore. Max took a step forward, forcing Lucas to grip the leash tightly. Dog-Eye was convinced. Asul, his voice, seemed to be shouting a truth that no one else had yet seen. The coach swallowed hard, looking away. Lucas left the room with Max, but the feeling of danger followed him all the way down the hallway. Doggy kept his gaze fixed, sniffing the walls as if each shadow hid a clue. The light flickered irritatingly, making the atmosphere even more tense. Heart Lucas's beat was in sync with Max's, as if they were connected by something greater. It was as if a hidden thread of destiny was pulling both of them. Before the appointed time, Max stopped again in front of Raphael's cell. But this time, it wasn't because he missed him. Dog, he barked loudly, as if trying to prevent something terrible from happening. Raphael recoiled, surprised, while Lucas tried to understand the warning. The air grew heavy, almost impossible to breathe. The feeling that they were on the verge of a huge discovery filled the hallway, and the silence, before the storm arrived, it seemed to foreshadow the worst. Max remained standing in front of the cell, his whole body tense, as if he sensed something no human could see. Lucas tried to pull him away, but Dog, he resisted with a force driven by pure instinct. Raphael stood motionless, observing it with a heart. The silence between the three seemed to carry an ancient secret. The cold light of the hallway made everything more dramatic. Something vibrated there, like a warning about to explode. The guards began to whisper, finding everything too strange. Some laughed, saying that the dog he was confused. But Lucas had known Max since puppy, and he knew that this behavior wasn't random. His instincts had never failed him in years of working together. Soul, the animal seemed to be capturing something hidden, like a distant scent of danger. The tension grew, invisible but real. It was impossible to ignore. Raphael placed his hands on the railing, his face pale, almost voiceless. He tried to touch the air, as if he wanted to reach the energy of... Dog Lucas observed this with bewilderment, because the condemned man's eyes shone, as if recognizing something sacred. Max took a step back, as if processing a memory. The entire corridor seemed to breathe slowly. Hope and fear mixed in. One of the guards insisted that Lucas remove the dog from there, claiming that he was interfering with the procedure. But Lucas felt something different, a restlessness that stirred within himself. Max was trying to say something, and ignoring it would be betraying the animal's very purpose. He looked at Raphael and saw quiet tears streaming down his face. Silence, it weighed like lead. Doubt grew within him. When Lucas took a few steps back, Max growled again toward the side corridor, not at Raphael. The sound made everyone turn around. The same technician with the clipboard hurried past, avoiding any eye contact. Max pulled the guide in his direction, insistently. Lucas felt a shiver run down his spine. That dog, he never reacted like that without reason. The light flickered more brightly. Something dark was lurking around that man. The guards tried to stop Lucas from following the coach, claiming that the time was critical and that any delay would cause problems. But Max whimpered, pushing Lucas's chest with his head, a gesture he only made in situations of real danger. Loyalty. The animal's lifelessness was unquestionable. Soul. His voice seemed to be screaming for attention. Lucas took a deep breath and decided to continue. The technician quickly entered the materials room, locking the door behind him. Max began scratching desperately at the wood, as if he knew exactly what was hidden there. Lucas knocked on the door, demanding explanations, but there was no answer. Silence. Inside, It was deafening, almost menacing. The light from the hallway cast strange shadows on the wall. The atmosphere grew heavy. When they finally forced the door open, they found the technician sitting on the floor, pale, holding the same envelope Max had sniffed earlier. He was trembling, sweating, unable to explain why he was there. Dog, he approached slowly, sniffing the air with precision. The metallic smell seemed stronger now. Lucas smelled it. Heart to squeeze. Perhaps that envelope concealed more than just paper. Lucas carefully picked up the envelope and noticed dark, old stains on the edges, as if it had been stored for years. Inside, there was only one photograph, a mother holding a baby wrapped in a blanket identical to the one Max had found. Lucas's breath caught in his throat. That object was a direct link to someone. Doubt was beginning to turn into suspicion. The coach stammered, saying he'd found the envelope by chance, but Max growled softly, indicating that was a lie. Soul do dog, he perceived truths that humans tried to hide. Lucas stared at the man, trying to understand the reason for that fear. The atmosphere in the room became more suffocating. Silence. It seemed to say much more than his words. There were secrets there, and they weren't small ones. Back in the hallway, Lucas walked with Max beside him, trying to organize his thoughts. He knew something was wrong with Raphael's case, even without knowing what. Max's gaze followed every move of the coach, who now completely avoided them. It was as if he were unraveling an invisible puzzle. A mixture of darkness and the truth trembled in the air. Lucas decided to go back to Raphael. When they arrived at the cell, the condemned man was sitting, his face lost in thought, hope and fear. Max immediately approached, pressing his snout between the bars. Raphael closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, as if that touch awakened a profound memory. Asul, the man's body seemed broken. Something was about to emerge. "Did you bring the blanket?" Raphael asked, his voice breaking. Lucas hesitated, but took the fabric out of his backpack. At that same instant, Raphael fell to his knees, his hands trembling. His tears, they spilled out uncontrollably. Max laid his head on the floor, as if he perfectly understood that pain. Thessalence. Between them, they spoke louder than words. Lucas felt the heart to tighten. Raphael recounted, for the first time, that the blanket belonged to his son, whom he swore he hadn't hurt. He said the police had found evidence, but that he had never seen the boy again. Max kept his gaze fixed on him, listening as if he were a guardian. Hope Raphael's face was fragile, almost brittle. Lucas began to feel that some piece of this story didn't fit. The head guard interrupted, irritated, saying it was a waste of time. "You can't believe what a convict says." But Lucas wasn't so sure anymore. Max's behavior was impossible to ignore. The dog, he walked to the end of the hallway and barked again toward the room where they had found the blanket. The echo of the bark seemed like a warning. The truth was calling. The guards began to grow impatient, pressuring Lucas to end the interaction and follow the schedule. But the loyalty Max's voice was a silent cry that he could no longer ignore. Hart Lucas's hand was tapping restlessly, as if he were betraying something sacred by following the rules. He decided to ask for a few minutes off. The silence turned to pure tension. Meanwhile, Raphael remained kneeling, clutching the blanket to his chest, as if it were the last piece of love left in his life. Max approached again, resting his paw on the bars. It was a rare gesture, almost a sign of love, miracle coming from instinct. A soul, the broken man's body, seemed to connect with that of the animal. Lucas watched everything, sensing that fate was changing. Suddenly, Max raised his head, sniffing the air intently. His eyes fixed on the ceiling, then on the wall next to the cell. He began to bark, loudly, desperately. The guards tried to silence the animal, but Doggett wouldn't stop. The feeling of danger grew like a storm. Lucas felt the cold on his skin. It was a real warning. Something was hiding there, too close. Lucas placed his hand on the wall, trying to understand what Max perceived. The concrete felt cold, but the dog he persisted, scratching the spot forcefully. The head guard scoffed, saying it was animal nonsense, but Max never missed. The police officer sped up. He ran to get a flashlight. The light revealed a thin mark on the wall, something no one had noticed before. The guards began arguing amongst themselves, claiming it meant nothing. But Max stood before the mark like a true guardian. Dog, he stared at the wall as if protecting a buried truth. The silence. The weight in the hallway had become almost unbearable. Lucas took a deep breath. It was time to find out what was there. With the flashlight firmly in his hand, Lucas pressed the mark and noticed a hollow sound. The noise echoed down the hallway, making everyone hold their breath. Max barked loudly, confirming his discovery. The wall had a hidden compartment. Lucas seemed to pause for a second. Doubt turned to certainty. The truth lay behind that fragile concrete, and it was about to change everything. Lucas quickly asked for a tool, his voice trembling the heart. He barked rapidly, as if anticipating the impact of the truth. The guards tried to stop him, claiming it wasn't protocol. But Max barked so loudly that the entire hallway fell silent instantly. Soul, the animal seemed to be commanding, "Open up!" The tension was so thick that any one breath it seemed heavy. The wall concealed something alive. With firm blows, Lucas began to break through the concrete while Max maintained his guard position. Each piece that fell revealed an old, dense, almost metallic smell that made the dog retreating and returning at the same time. The guards watched in astonishment, as if they were witnessing a miracle uncomfortable. The hallway seemed narrower, as if the darkness, if you squeezed. Something terrible was about to emerge. When he finally made enough room, Lucas shone his flashlight inside. Inside the compartment was a small, old metal box, sealed shut by rust and time. Max whimpered, as if he recognized the object. The heart Lucas fired back. That seemed to be connected to Raphael's case. Thessalon's. It went so deep that the echo of the metal sounded like a scream. It was the missing piece. With effort, Lucas pulled the box and placed it on the ground. Max put his snout on the lid, as if asking to open it. The guards exchanged tense glances, as if the truth were too dangerous. Lucas took a deep breath and opened the box. Inside were a child's bracelet, a piece of burnt cloth, and a torn photograph. Max seemed to tremble. Raphael, seeing it from afar, collapsed. The photograph showed a baby wrapped in the exact same blanket Raphael was holding now. The image was cropped, but you could see an adult's arm holding the child. Lucas felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. The guards fell silent. Hope and horror mingled in the air. The bracelet had a name engraved on it. Samuel, the same name Raphael had said was his son's. Silence. It turned into a shock. Raphael started banging on the fence, desperate, asking to see the photo. His tears, they fell like heavy rain, revealing an old and deep pain. Max ran to the bars without fear, as if he wanted to comfort him. Dodogi placed his paw between the metal parts. A rare gesture of love. Lucas handed the photograph through the bars. Raphael held it with his soul trembling. The truth was beginning to breathe. Between sobs, Raphael recounted that on the day of the crime, someone had broken into his house and taken his son. He swore he never hurt the child, but no one believed him. The bracelet, the photo, the blanket, everything fit together in a terrifying way. Max lay down in front of the cell, like a hero saving that man's last chance. Lucas burned with doubt and anger. It was too real to ignore. One of the guards nervously said that wasn't enough proof, but Max barked loudly at him, as if to say he was wrong. Doggy sniffed the technician again, who recoiled as if he were about to be swallowed whole. Lucas realized the man was trembling too much to be innocent. A darkness. It was visible all around him. The truth was stuck in his throat. Max could feel it. Lucas asked the technician to explain how the box had ended up there. The man paled, stammering, saying that it had always been in that place. But Max stepped forward, growling softly, making the technician back up against the wall. This was no simple matter. Dog reacting. It was pure instinct sniffing out guilt. A soul. The coach seemed to be falling apart. Lucas knew he was hiding something. Under pressure, the coach broke down. He confessed to working for a gang that kidnapped children and planted evidence on vulnerable people. Raphael was one of them. The box had been hidden there years ago to close the case quickly. Max barked loudly, as if confirming every word. The heart everyone froze. The revelation hit them like a punch. Darkness. The hallway seemed to open up and swallow everything. Raphael fell seated on the cell floor, his whole body trembling. He clutched the photograph to his chest as if embracing himself. Solmax lay down near the bars, his gaze full of hope, as if promising that it wouldn't end there. Lucas felt a deep lump in his throat. The truth was exposed, but the execution was still scheduled. Time was a cruel enemy. Lucas ran to the principal's office, with Max beside him, breathing heavily. He handed over the photo, the bracelet, and the coach's recorded statement. The principal turned pale, his expression shattering like glass. The injustice was too great to be ignored. Silence. The tension between them was overwhelming. The fate of the condemned man now rested in their hands. Max rested his head on Lucas's knee for support. The director immediately alerted the Internal Affairs Department. Orders echoed through the radios. Footsteps rushed down the hallway. The atmosphere changed violently. The execution was temporarily suspended. It was a small thing, but it was a thread of life. Max walked beside Lucas like a true person. Hero the heart, it all seemed to beat at the same urgent rhythm. It was in progress. Raphael still didn't know about the suspension. He was kneeling, hugging the blanket as if it were the last piece of his life. Love in the world. Max approached again and lay down before him, letting the man touch his paw. It was a gesture of loyalty pure. Orsolence in the cell, it was almost poetic. Lucas observed with the soul it was tight. He knew that this moment was bigger than everyone else there. When Lucas came in to warn him, Raphael completely collapsed, his face hidden in his hands. His stares, it was a mix of relief and sadness. Max sniffed her face, gently licking her wet skin. That dog, it was more than an animal. It was a thread of light in the middle of an abyss. Raphael whispered his son's name as a plea for hope. The entire hallway was filled with emotion. The guards, previously gruff, were now quiet, moved by the scene. The revelation shook everyone, as if a wind of truth had swept through the air. Darkness. Lucas knew that this wasn't the end yet. They needed to find the child. They needed to prove everything. But a new destiny was beginning there. Max was ready. Soul, his spirit vibrated with purpose. The truth had been set free, but it demanded more. As they walked down the hallway, Lucas noticed that Max stopped again, his gaze fixed on the photograph. Dog, he touched the image with his snout, as if recognizing the baby. Lucas felt a deep shiver. Perhaps that was a clue. Perhaps the hero who saved one man, now he had to save someone much bigger. Heart, he began to believe. Hope, it was growing again. Lucas requested access to the old case files. The director authorized it without hesitation. Max sat beside him in the cold records room, sniffing through boxes, papers, and old photos. Dog, he seemed guided by something invisible. When he stopped in front of a specific folder, Lucas realized that this might be the key. The truth was unfolding in layers. The silence, now there was hope. Inside the folder were records of medical visits, complaints, and a name that was repeated several times. The same technician. The web of lies became more evident with each line. Max sniffed the paper and barked briefly, as if to say, "That's it!" Lucas felt his chest burn with indignation. Dog, he was right from the start. A darkness. The mystery behind the case was deep, but now it's come to light. Lucas ran back down the hallway to show Raphael the new documents. Max walked steadily beside him, like a tireless guardian. The condemned man raised his face, the heart beating rapidly with a wire of hope. When Lucas handed him the papers, the man cried again, but this time with a soul thanking God. The path to truth was open, and Max was the bridge. At the end of the corridor, the first light of dawn began to enter through the narrow windows, tinging the walls with gold. Max positioned himself there, gazing at the horizon, as if he understood that this was only the beginning. Lucas took a deep breath, feeling a weight lift from his chest. Hero, the four-legged creature, had rewritten an entire destiny, and the final revelation only confirmed one thing. There was still much to save. The entire corridor vibrated when the official suspension of the execution was announced. Guards rushed forward, radios blared with tense voices and urgent orders. Max stood firm, as if he had waited for this his whole life. Lucas glanced at the dog, feeling the heart to vibrate with a mixture of relief and adrenaline. Hope it was beginning to bloom in the air. The war for truth had begun. The internal affairs team arrived quickly, taking control of the prison with rigor and focus. Documents were collected, rooms locked, and people separated for questioning. Max remained by Lucas's side the entire time, attentive like a true police officer, inspector, hero. A soul, the animal's pulse seemed to beat with purpose. There was urgency that morning. Every minute now could change an entire destiny. While the delegates were interviewing the coach, Lucas returned to Raphael to inform him that he would not be executed. The condemned man fell to his knees, holding the photo of his son, as if he were holding his own. Max approached calmly, placing his snout between the bars. It was a gesture of purity, almost amicable thessalence. There was a taste of life being reborn there. Raphael gave thanks between sobs. With authorization from the Internal Affairs Department, Lucas took Max to inspect the old warehouse mentioned by the technician. The area was far from the city, surrounded by tall grass and a heavy silence. Max walked ahead, sniffing everything with instinctive precision. Doggett seemed to be guided by something greater. The heart Lucas's voice was pounding, as if he sensed a painful and necessary revelation. The journey was tense. The shed was locked with an old rusty padlock, but Max didn't hesitate. He barked loudly, scratching forcefully at the door, indicating that something was alive inside. Lucas called for backup, and the guards broke down the door. The musty smell of dust and metal filled the air. Dim light flooded the space, revealing boxes, old clothes, and children's belongings. Darkness. There was history there, and a hidden truth. Max ran to the far end of the shed, where there was a small side door. He scratched at the wood desperately, as if... Soul! He shouted for urgency. Lucas opened the door and found a makeshift room. There were children's drawings pasted on the wall, a small mattress, and toys scattered around. The heart. He tightened his grip. The air grew heavy. This wasn't just evidence. It was life interrupted. In the corner of the room, there was a box with documents, photos, and medical records. Max barked loudly, as if reinforcing that the final key was there. Lucas opened the papers with trembling hands. Among them, he found records proving that Raphael's son was alive years after the crime. It was the proof that no one had ever looked for. The injustice was so brutal that... Silence. It seemed like it was screaming. One of the guards found a folder with scheduled visits for children under irregular guardianship. The gang's name was repeated on several papers, and the technician was one of those responsible for making evidence disappear. Max growled upon hearing his name again, as if confirming everything. Lucas felt the world spin. A hope she could breathe again inside. Light was entering through the crack in the truth. The police team collected all the material and sent it for immediate analysis. Lucas left the warehouse with Max beside him, the sun finally breaking through the cloudy sky. That light seemed symbolic, as if it were touching the soul-do dog. The heart Lucas's feelings were mixed: pain, relief, anger, and a newfound faith in Max's instincts. Hero silently, he was rewriting lives. Back at the prison, Raphael waited, trembling, clutching the blanket. Lucas entered with the evidence folder in his hands. Max ran to the cell, wagging his tail slowly, as if to say, "I did it." Raphael placed his hands on the wall, staring at the dog with tears running. When Lucas said they had found records of his son being alive, the man collapsed. A hope it exploded in the air like light. It was life being reborn. The Internal Affairs Department ordered Raphael's immediate release while the investigation continued. The entire prison stopped to watch the moment the man emerged, supported by 2 guards. Lucas walked beside him, with Max guiding the way. Doggett seemed to float as if its soul it was light. The scene was a fresco of victory against the darkness, a true rebirth. Raphael touched Max's head for the first time outside the goalposts. The gesture was full of love, as if recognizing an old bond. "You saved my life." "Again," he said, his voice breaking. Max rested his head on his chest, listening to, heart still trembling. It was impossible not to feel the weight of that moment. The loyalty of Doggett was almost divine. One hero silent among humans. In the following days, the investigation revealed names, routes, clandestine houses, and lies buried for years. Max participated in all the searches, guiding the police officers as if he were the one in charge. Soul, his movements were driven by invisible maps. Lucas felt pride and reverence for Dog. The animal's instinct was saving much more than a life. It was a movement of justice, of light breaking darkness. It was on a grey afternoon that they found a secluded hideout connected to the gang. Max ran inside before any order. The dog, he followed a scent, a trace of memory, to a locked door. He barked so loudly that everyone knew someone was there. The guards opened it, and inside was a 9-year-old child, frightened, holding a drawing in his hands. Hope it was reborn. The child looked at Max with a glint in his eye, as if he recognized her. Dog Lucas approached slowly and saw the name on the drawing, Samuel Hart. His gaze almost stopped. It was Raphael's son. The boy was alive, fragile, but alive. Max lay down before him, gently offering his snout. The little one touched his hand, as if finding peace. It was a miracle without exaggeration, based on facts. Samuel was immediately taken for medical treatment and specialized protection. Raphael waited outside the police station, his whole body trembling. When he saw his son get out of the car, he fell to his knees. Max ran to the scene, his tail wagging slowly, as if uniting father and son through the power of his son. Hart Raphael hugged Samuel tightly. Soul, his body seemed to return to normal. The world stopped. Lucas watched from afar, his chest burning with emotion. Max sat between the two, as if he were the missing link in that story. Dog seemed to understand the magnitude of rescue, the impact of that reunion. Raphael was crying, Samuel too, and Max simply remained there, solid, present, essential. A hope it became a reality. Darkness, she was overcome by loyalty. The news spread quickly through the city and then the state. Reporters, police officers, and emotional families sent messages about the Dog A hero who solved an entire case. But Max wasn't seeking fame. He just wanted to stay close to Lucas, safe and calm, as always. Soul do Dog it was simple. To protect, to love, to guide. And the heart, he fulfilled this role perfectly. The justice system decided to review dozens of old cases, using Max as additional support in the investigations. The prison that was once the scene of death became the setting for rebirth. Light replaced darkness, Lucas felt pride but also humility because he knew that nothing would have happened without the silent courage of Dog. Max had transformed pain into rescue, fear into hope. On his first night back home, Raphael, now free, thanked Lucas for everything. But Lucas pointed to Max and said, "It was him." Dog, he lay at its feet, listening calmly, as if he understood every word. Raphael knelt down and embraced the animal with absolute respect. A soul everyone there seemed connected. It was the end of a war and the beginning of a new life. Sometimes the light. What saves a life doesn't come from words, but from the pure instinct of one, Dog, who sees soul before sentencing. Max proved that loyalty, it is capable of rewriting destinies that the world had already declared lost. When the truth finally breathed, it came on the paws of a hero who did not give up. And in that reunion of father and son, the hope it came back to life, not as a miracle, but as justice guided by the heart of an animal. If this story touched you, leave A in the comments.